Metal detectors are a great way to find a lot of gold fast. I've found pounds of nuggets over the years with my metal detectors, and other people find lots of gold pounds worldwide every day. I mean, there's so many metal detectors, so many guys out with it. And I've got a lot of requests to kind of compare different ones, and I thought a really fun and exciting comparison is going to be the new gold bug tracker versus the GPZ 7000. I mean, literally, we're talking the heaviest, most powerful, most expensive metal detector designed for gold on the market, and the least expensive, not so powerful, but very low cost. Compare the two. They're very different, and but the price difference is huge. This thing, this heavy, very powerful metal detector, retails for about $9,500, $9,499. A lot of people are offering it for, and this is $299. A whole lot cheaper, but a whole lot less powerful. And so we're going to dig in and look at the two different kinds of detectors. Now, the reason that people are out with metal detectors and finding a lot of gold is because the old timers that mined in the 1800s and the early 1900s and all, they never had any kind of a tool like a metal detector. If they would have, they would have found a lot more gold. And so guys and gals too, are today out with metal detectors finding the gold that the old timers just couldn't see. Didn't have a tool that would get them that kind of gold. And so let me show you, just as an example, some of the gold that I've found over the years. It's pretty exciting. Let's take a look. This is 1.8 ounces of nice nuggets. All of these are mostly pretty coarse, and that I found last summer out in Northern California. And some of these are rather large. I mean, there's two there that are over a quarter of an ounce. The biggest one is almost half an ounce. And then a number of these are pretty good sized. Only a couple of them are small. But this is the kind of thing you can find with a metal detector, and it's still out there to be found. Here's a couple ounces of gold I found with my metal detector in Alaska, including a couple of pretty nice sized pieces, as well as a number of nice smaller ones. And this was a great find. You can do this kind of thing with a metal detector. Here's some nice nuggets that I found with my metal detector in Nevada. This is probably close to a half an ounce of gold, but still at today's prices, that's, like $1,200-$1,300 worth of gold. That's impressive. Here's about $7,500 worth of gold I found in Northern California with my metal detector. Now, I've been doing this for years, so it's not like I found this all in a week, but, it's out there to be found if you get out there and explore. And of course, not everything is huge. There's lots of little gold to be found. This is over 170 pieces of gold I found on a trip to Alaska, all of which are small, and so they don't have as much weight, but still, at today's prices, this is over $500 worth of gold. And so when you get out and explore with a metal detector, there's gold, big and small, to be found. There's a lot of excitement about metal detecting for nuggets because the price of gold is so crazy high. I mean, literally today as I'm filming this, it's over $3,400 per troy ounce. And that equates to like $107 or $8 a gram. That's just crazy. It means that for a $2.99 detector like this, you'd only have to find about 1/10 of an ounce of gold to pay for it. And even for a super powerful, super expensive monster like the GPZ, you still need less than 3 ounces. In the US, it was something I did the calc around 2.7, 2.8 ounces of gold will pay for this thing. And I got to tell you, I've paid for mine many times over, okay? Many times. But, most guys don't want to, most women and men don't want to spend, most of $10,000 when they're just getting started. So we're going to compare the two. Now, like I say, a lot of people are interested in metal detecting for gold because the price is so high. You may live in an area of this country or your country, wherever you're at, that produced some gold in the past. But the problem is, this $2.99 one is way at the low end. The normal price for a lot of gold detectors designed for gold nugget hunting is in the thousands, and most of them aren't quite up to what this is, but still it can be thousands of dollars. And so, because it's expensive, a lot of folks have hesitated to pull the trigger and really jump in and get involved. But in order to better understand the differences between the two, between an inexpensive VLF detector like the Gold Bug Tracker and a very expensive but very powerful heavy-duty nugget detector like the GPZ 7000, we're going to do this video and dig in and take a look at the two of them. First, I'll talk a little bit about the GPZ 7000. Mine is dirty and it's been out and I've used it in a lot of places. I probably should take some Windex or something and try and clean it off. But I've had this for years, and like I say, I found way more gold than enough to pay for it, especially at today's modern prices. But it is expensive and it is heavy. Now, it's widely acknowledged to be the world's most powerful nugget detector, at least the most powerful one that's generally available on the market. You can buy these. You've got the money, you can buy one, no problem. They're out there to be had. One of the main features of this detector, the GPZ 7000, is that it punches really deep. And it can see relatively small gold from shallow all the way down. It does actually a good job of detecting small nuggets, even though it has a pretty large coil. We're going to talk about coil sizes as part of our comparing the two, because really these are two apples and oranges types of metal detectors. They're very different in the technology. They're very different in how they're set up. They're both metal detectors, and they're both designed with the hunting of gold nuggets in mind. But the GPZ does a great job of punching deeper. Now, just as an example to kind of compare, this last summer, if you've watched some of my videos, you've probably seen me mention it. This last summer, I found a neat new nugget patch in a general area that I've hunted before, but a few hundred yards away from any place that I'd hunted previously. And I picked up 51 ounces of nuggets, a lot of which were pretty good sized. Now, most of the work, pretty much all of the work I did finding that 50-something ounce or 50-something grams was done with the GPZ 7000. And, that 50 grams, 51 grams, that's enough to pay for, getting close to half of the price, just right there. Like I say, I've had this for years. Gotten a lot of gold with it in different places. But it just, they did a great job. And this summer, I'm going to go back to the same place with an even bigger, because I've got the big coil for the GPZ. Yeah, the standard coil is huge. The big coil is even bigger. So I'm going to go out there with the even bigger coil, because a lot of the nuggets in that patch were deep. And because this detector sees deep, I'm hoping that with an even bigger coil, I'm going to punch down even deeper and hopefully find some more of those big nuggets. The biggest one I got last summer from that patch was about 0.4 of an ounce. So, a little less than half an ounce. That's pretty good size. And this thing is made to punch down and see some of those really deep ones. Now, if I'd been hunting that same patch, if you asked me the question, okay, of your 51 grams, how much of that would you've probably been able to see with the tracker? Well, I gotta say that with the tracker, I probably would have seen 4, maybe 5 grams of the 51, a tenth of it, or maybe a little less than a tenth. And simply because most of the nuggets, especially the good sized ones, were down deep. There were some small ones near the surface, and this thing would have done a great job with those. But, when you're hunting deep nuggets, this thing with its small coil is, and you can see by the comparison, this one's a lot smaller. Well, like I said, we'll talk more about coil sizes in a minute. But this one just doesn't punch as deep. But, you know, you got to consider the price difference. You can buy 31 of these for the price of one of these. Now, I don't know, you can't use 31 detectors at once. I've seen people kind of crazily try to use 2 at once. Certainly not 31. So it's a good detector, but I recommend it mostly for beginners. That's what I'm usually talking about folks with. Now, one of the things that's kind of interesting about these 2 detectors is that I was involved with the initial testing for both of them. I was involved with the initial testing for the GPZ, and I was involved with initial testing for the Gold Bug tracker. When I was doing this, a friend of mine, Steve, and I had one of the first GPZs in the US, probably was the first. We were out testing it in different places and finding that it just punched amazingly deep, especially on gold that was kind of wiry or mossy. It just does a great job that some other pulse induction detectors don't do as well on. And like I say, it punches real deep. As a part of that, I dug a wire gold nugget at about 18 inches with the GPZ. It was a hearable sound at the surface. I mean, it wasn't like I heard a tiny whisper. It wasn't loud, but it was a definite, oh yeah, here's target. And as I dug down, of course, it got louder and louder and louder and louder until it was out of the hole. But this gold was not solid. It's just wires and stuff. And it was amazing to me that this detector could hear a wiry nugget at 18 inches. Now, it was a good size nugget. It was 20 grams, so 2/3 of an ounce. A couple $1,000 worth at today's prices. And so, this detector, that's just one nugget that this detector has found for me. And this other one, the tracker, never would have seen that at that kind of depth. That's part of the small coil thing. Now, I was also involved with this detector, the Gold Bug tracker, which was basically taking the Gold Bug Pro, and their initial, Fisher's initial thought with it was to adapt it to the African market. Now, I've been a couple times over to Africa with the Fisher, and we detected and we, demonstrated the detectors to some of the local folks. And it's a great detector, and the Gold Bug Pro, which is the kind of the predecessor of this, I found some nice gold in Africa with it. But this detector, because in my experience, and it was the Fisher's observations too, was that manual detectors, there was issues with them. That the manual detectors, they could, the manual ground balance is what I'm talking about. Manual ground balance, the local guys were not as tech savvy as maybe some other customers, and they would benefit a lot from a machine that had automatic ground balance and was just a little simpler to operate. And that was kind of the design thing for the Gold Bug tracker. Now in Africa, it's called the Gold Bug for Africa. But I told Fisher, you don't want to name that for when you're selling it to America. But they came up with the name, and on the American market, it's the Gold Bug tracker. If you're actually in Africa and you want to buy one, you're going to be looking for the Gold Bug for Africa to find a local dealer that has that. So anyway, I did get to play with this and test it in various places, and I was real impressed. For a VLF, for what it is, for the price that it sells for, it's a great deal. It's a good detector. It's very solid. For a VLF, it does a great job of resisting ground mineralization and hot rocks, which is one of the things that VLFs have issues with. So, both these machines I was real impressed with, and, they both performed really well for what they are, taking all things into consideration. You can't expect a $299 VLF to perform like a $9,500 pulse machine. And so let's talk about these two machines. They really are, in many ways, apples and oranges. Yes, they're both nugget detectors. Yes, they're both designed with gold nuggets in mind. Yes, they're both metal detectors and do a good job for what they're designed to do. But they're very different in a lot of ways. And the first way we're going to talk about is that the VLF versus a pulse induction machine. Engineers that design these things call these frequency domain detectors versus time domain detectors. And the pulse machines are the time domain, and the frequency, the VLFs are the frequency domain. And basically they work on very different principles. The VLFs basically have two coils that are transmitting and looking for stuff. There's a transmit coil and a receive coil, and they're in opposite balance. They're up and down. The frequency of electrical flow through the coil is like a sine wave, but they're two sine waves that are completely opposite. So that if one is up, the other is down. The other is up, the other is down, and they go back and forth. And it creates a balance. So as this one, they balance each other. And if a metal target gets into the area that the coil can see, it disrupts that balance because it has its own field. And that balance change, it leads to a signal. That's why these machines, the VLFs, are also sometimes called induction balance, because the target in the soil gets the balance off, and then the machine knows, oh, we're out of balance, something's wrong, and that means that there's a target. So that's how those work. The pulse induction machines, the time domain machines, work differently. They basically send out a pulse of energy that will energize any metallic pieces that are in the ground. Send out a pulse of energy and then turn off and then look for response. And because it's a turn off and look, you can actually do it with the same coil. You can have what they call a mono coil, where the same coil puts out the pulse, shuts off, the electricity is shut off, and then the same coil looks for a response. And this allows the pulse induction machines to ignore a lot of ground mineralization and hot rocks. Basically, hot rocks and ground mineralization are a situation where they decay super fast. And, a lot of times engineers will say they decay instantaneously. That's really not true. It's just they figure it that way for mathematical purposes, but they decay really fast. Not quite instantaneous, but really fast. And as the thing is energized, because of the induction balance, it always has transmit and receive. Therefore, when you shut off with the pulse induction machine, when you shut off the power for a tiny fraction of a second, you allow a lot of the magnetics and other things in the soil, not the metallic targets. The metallic targets have a much longer period of decay, although it's still really super short, compared to the ground mineralization though. And by shutting off, you allow most of that hot rock and ground mineralization to decay away and disappear. And so then when you turn back on and you're looking for a signal, then you can see it. But that's why, in general, as a general rule, pulse induction machines don't see as small a gold, that the VLFs see smaller gold, and the VLFs have more sensitivity to hot rocks and mineralization, that the pulse induction machines don't. So that's a general thing of how they work. Like I say, the engineers have done a lot to try and bridge the gap, and the Gold Bug Tracker does a good job for a VLF machine at resisting mineralization. On the pulse induction machine side, a lot of manufacturers have done and engineers have done a lot of job to make the PI detectors much more sensitive to small gold. And one of the things that, like I say, about the GPZ is it is very sensitive to small gold, to wiry gold, to other gold that it has weak responses, and it's able to see deep. Now, one of the things about the whole design of PI versus VLF, and when you make the PI more sensitive to small gold, you start making the PI more sensitive to mineralization. And so by doing that, you know, it is kind of a trade-off. If you get high enough mineralization, it starts to become a problem. But anyway, there's a discussion of the PI versus VLF. Now, some of you may say, well, the GPZ is a zero energy discrimination. You know, they say it's not a PI detector. Actually, it is a time domain machine. It is technically a pulse induction. It's not some kind of weird hybrid. It is a very specialized and hybridized pulse induction machine, yes, but it is a pulse induction machine and subject to the strengths and some of the limitations of pulse induction machines. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is coil sizes. So you can see by comparison, the coil sizes are hugely different, all right? This one is a 5-inch coil. This is 14 by 13, I think the big GPZ coil is. Now, to really compare metal detectors as far as sensitivity and depth and that kind of thing, to be honest, you need to have basically the same kind of coil on each detector. And the truth is, for the gold bug tracker, there's no coil that's, you know, as big as that other one. There's a bigger coil than the one that's on it, but you lose a lot of sensitivity. So when guys are talking about, or ladies, when anyone's talking about using this detector for gold, I tell them, you know, use this small coil for gold. If you're going to take it out in a park or school and look for coins and that kind of stuff, yeah, sure, put on the bigger coil. But you lose sensitivity to the smaller nuggets with switching to the larger coil. And there's no small coil for the GPZ. That 14 by 13 inch coil I just showed you, yeah, that's the smallest coil that comes for it. Actually, I think there's a one that's aftermarket manufacturer coil that's slightly smaller, but it's not a lot smaller. It's only a little smaller. And then there's one that's even bigger. So it's a coil made for, you know, having a big coil on it and seeing targets down deep. That the machine is intended to see stuff deep. That's what it does. And so comparing the two kinds of coils, when you have a little tiny coil and a very big coil, it's not an even comparison. It's an apples and oranges. It might even be an apples and a rabbits. You know, kind of, you know, really different. Not even two different kinds of fruit. They're very different. And with the VLF versus PI, you know, that's also different. But the coil for the tracker is a DD or a double D type of coil. Let me show you a picture of what that looks like on the inside. Here is a standard double D type coil design, what it looks like on the inside. You can see there's basically D-shaped wire, one facing correct way for a D and the other one is like a backwards D, but they overlap, and it's that area of overlap where there is the maximum level of sensitivity. Now, it's sensitive all the way around to a certain level, but the maximum is the overlap. Now, this type of coil is very standard and used in a lot of different metal detectors, and one of the things that it does for a VLF is that it helps give the VLF a little more resistance to mineralization and hot rocks. The coil for the GPZ 7000 is what I call a DOD coil, and so it has a D coil facing one way, then it has a square roundy square coil in the middle, and then a third coil is the D facing the other way, and so it has two overlaps instead of the one overlap that you have with a double D. That's just the design of it. And then the coil in the tracker is pretty standard. The coil in the GPZ is really unusual in that there's a huge amount of wire. I think that one of the engineers said one time that there's about 6,000 feet of wire in a GPZ 7000. Whereas I would guess in the Gold Bug, the little coil, probably not more than between 50 and 100, probably maybe a little more than 50 type of thing. So that's a huge amount of copper wire difference. And it, the field, the electricity going through the coil is what generates the electrical field that goes into the ground. And the more windings you have with the same electricity, the more windings, the more intense the electrical field. So that's part of what the GPZ does to see both small stuff and see really deep, is it generates a pretty strong electrical field. Next, we'll talk about the weight. And this really is it's a heavy versus light kind of comparison. This thing is a couple of pounds. This thing is, what is it, 6-7 pounds, something like that. It's triple the weight of the tracker. So there's a big weight difference, and you might say, well, it's still just a few pounds, right? But you swing that thing all day, you'll feel it. And so when you're using the 7000, they actually give you harness and special stuff to help you carry it better and balance it, whereas the tracker doesn't come with anything like that, and for the most part really doesn't need anything like that unless you have a real bad shoulder or something like that. The tracker is just so much lighter that it just doesn't wear on you the same way, whereas the beast of the 7000, that'll wear on you pretty quick. I've used the 7000 with no support, just like, oh, I'm going to use it for a few minutes, and then go out there and after half an hour it's like, oh, my shoulder, oh, my back. It's it needs the extra help to hold it up, the bungee cords and things. Finally, discrimination. That's another thing that we talk about, is that the discrimination, the Gold Bug trackers, there's pretty good discrimination for a VLF. Generally, PIs, the discrimination is not that great, although some of them do have discrimination. The GPZ 7000 has no discrimination at all. So for an extra 9,200, you get no discrimination where you get it on the cheap detector. It's just a part of the technology and how it's designed. So there is there's no discrimination on the 7000. And it makes a difference. Now, some prospectors will tell you have to dig everything. Go out there, you hear a signal, you must dig it. And I agree if you're in an area where you have low to moderate kinds of trash. You really should dig it all. I totally agree with that. But it so happens that a lot of times the old timers would camp right in their area of where they were working, and if they had a piece of metallic trash, well, now problem solved. You have another piece of trash, problem solved. So a lot of these areas can be spread with just really intense, especially cans. They break down into little bits of steel and spread all over the place. Some places in the desert I've had problems with screening. Steel screening, real fine wires, it breaks out and it just spreads everywhere, these little screen wires. So, in areas of super intense trash, having discrimination is a powerful tool. And I know guys, like say, that they dig it all, but I can go show you places where there is gold, and if you want to dig it all, you'll spend it all day digging 100 trash targets. And the next day you'll dig 100 more trash targets, and maybe the third day you'll dig 75 trash targets and get a nugget. But I can go through there, no trash, no trash, no trash, no trash, no. Oh, this is lead or gold. I can, with discrimination, you can sort through stuff like that. So if it's not super duper uber trashy, dig it all. If it's super uber trashy and there's gold there, you might consider using discrimination. That's my opinion, having been a metal detector operator in a lot of different kinds of areas. So we've talked about this. Now, the GPZ has a number of bells and whistles. It has a GPS tracker that's built into it. that you can keep record of where you found all your gold and plot it on a map and see if there's trends of where the nuggets are. That can be really helpful. It has all kinds of different features of how it operates. You can adjust it in a zillion different ways. So, you know, it has a super amount of flexibility. The Gold Bug tracker, you know, it has automatic ground balance, but that's pretty much it. It has discrimination. You can adjust the discrimination too. That's the big features of the tracker. But hey, you're paying 31 times more for the GPZ, so you know you would expect less features on the inexpensive tracker. Now, we've talked a lot about these detectors. We've gone over some of the different things about them, and you know, I want to get out in the field and kind of show you a little bit about these two and maybe get a feel for, you know, what they have and what they have to offer. So let me take you out in the field, and we'll take a closer look at just comparing them on different kinds of targets, and we'll talk about the differences and how that works. So I wanted to do a comparison, and I took the GPZ out in my backyard, and I live on a half acre, so I can get away from houses, but just the nearby power systems. That's one of the things about sensitive pulse induction machines is they will see power lines and power systems. You know, I don't even have to have an overhead power line. Just the power in a neighboring house, including my house, will make this machine just go and make all kinds of noise. But I tested both of these machines, so I can tell you how they would react. And I will do a future video where I'm out in the field, out in the middle of nowhere, away from any power lines, and I will compare a number of the detectors I have so you guys can see how they perform. But what I'll tell you is that for really small stuff near the surface, they'll be pretty close. Obviously, with each swing, the 14-inch coil of the GPZ covers a lot more ground than the 5-inch coil of the Gold Bug tracker, but you know, at near small gold near the surface, they're pretty equal. In spite of that, they're, you know, huge price difference. Where it comes in is targets that are deeper. So as you get targets that get deeper down, even if they're a little bit larger, the GPZ is just going to see the targets much deeper. That's why I said earlier in this video that 51 gram patch that I found, that most of the nuggets that were found in that patch would not have been found by the Gold Bug tracker just because they were too deep. And that's the big advantage, and what you pay for with the GPZ is that it can see stuff very deep, including even wiry specimen-y type stuff. It just does an amazing job of punching down real deep. And that's what you pay for. That's what the big difference, you know, the $9,000 difference in price is the depth that the GPZ can see. Now you'll see in this picture, I'm all, you know, vested up with bungee cords and all kinds of things because it's necessary for the weight of the GPZ. So we'll have to put off our comparison, physical comparison, to a future video, but I promise to do that. And when I do it, I'm going to bring in a lot more than just the GPZ and the tracker. I'll bring in a bunch of different detectors so you can see how they perform on different targets. I'll bury some stuff in the ground and we'll go over that and talk about the differences in performance and price. Now, sometimes you can find GPZ 7000s on sale for a used price, you know, that somebody bought one, maybe they used it for a while, maybe they, you know, didn't find much gold or weren't happy or have an emergency financial thing where they have to get cash out of it. So you can sometimes see these for as inexpensive as about $5,000, but be real careful buying used stuff. There's Chinese knockoffs everywhere. Take it out, test it on different size targets, small targets, deep targets. Make sure that it's the real McCoy, because the Chinese can make stuff that looks so accurate like the original, because the manufacturing for both Minelab and Fisher, they use normal manufacturing normal manufacturing processes to manufacture their projects, and the Chinese can use those same normal manufacturing processes to produce an item, a metal detector that looks just like it. I've seen ones, but man, I had the same detector, and I looked at the Chinese copy, and it's like, man, I can't tell these apart. They're that accurate, but some of the things that I've seen, the performance isn't a tenth or 20th of what you'd get from the real item. So if you buy used, be real careful. Buy from reputable people. Test the thing. Make sure, don't find some offer on eBay. Oh, brand new, like new detector, cheap at $5,000, because you may be spending $5,000 and getting. You may wish that you'd spent the $299 to get the tracker instead of the $5,000 or instead of the $7,000. So be careful with buying used stuff. But sometimes some good bargains are to be had, and if you have reputable people and that kind of stuff, you can sometimes get good prices. As far as the tracker, it's so new. I don't know if there's been hardly many of them that are used on the market. It really has only been a matter of months that it's been for sale in the United States. And I want to make a note of that it's been in several places for sale. I'm teaming up with an outfit called High Plains Prospecting, or High Plains Prospectors. You can see a link to it in the description, but I'll put a note here, and I'll talk about it at the end of the video in my end section where I talk about my book and High Plains. But it's available from High Plains. They have a good price. You can put in Chris Ralph in all caps, no space, as a discount code, and you'll get something discounted off the price of that even. And they also sell the GPZ 7000. Hey, if you want to buy it, if I've convinced you that it's more powerful and you've got the money, well then the 7000 is a great detector, and High Plains has that stuff too. So High Plains, I recommend them. They're good guys if you're looking at buying a metal detector. They have, of course, they have all kinds of the stuff in between the least expensive and the most. Now, what's the conclusions of this? These are both good detectors for what they are. They both do a great job. You can't really seriously compare them because they're so different. Because I own a 7000, most of the time, or at least a lot of the time, I'm going to be out with my 7000. Now, there's some applications where I've got my SDC or my Axiom or my Gold Monster 1000 that I've got those out and I'm using them. But I use the GPZ 7000 a lot. And it's a great detector. Like I say, last summer I found some nice gold with it. So it's an excellent detector. What you choose is up to you. For new guys, especially if you have a budget limitation, I'm suggesting the tracker. If you have less budget limitations, but you don't want to spend $9,000 and plus, the Gold Monster 1000 by Minelab is an excellent VLF machine. I highly recommend it. I use it myself and have found plenty of gold with the Gold Monster. So that's another excellent machine. I haven't talked about it in this video, but I will in future videos. And it just all depends on what your goals and objectives and your financial limitations and abilities to pay for things are and how much you're into it. Now, the GPZ really is a detector for experienced, more advanced guys. It's not a beginner's detector, generally speaking. Although beginners, if you had the money, you can buy one. Tracker is an excellent choice for new guys with a budget. The Monster, good choice for new guys if your budget's a little larger. If after going through all this, you guys still have questions about this detector or other detectors, feel free to leave me a comment in the comments for this video. I answer all my comments. That's one of the things that I do that's unique. I answer my comments. So if you have a question, feel free to ask. Now, whatever you choose to as your metal detector, or whatever type of prospecting that you do, whether it's metal detecting or dry washing, sluicing, panning, dredging, whatever, it's a skill. And having good tools is great, but you need to be able to go out and find it. And the skill of finding gold is the skill of the prospector. And I wrote a book called Fistful of Gold, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the book, but I'm also going to talk a little bit about High Plains, my partner in the equipment here. And so hang on, and let me tell you a little bit more about my book and High Plains. This is my book, Fistful of Gold. It's an encyclopedia of everything you need to know to go out and find gold for yourself. It distills down my 45 years of experience out in the field prospecting, as well as my degree in mine engineering. It's, like I say, an encyclopedia. There's a lot to it. It's over 250,000 words long, hundreds of pages with hundreds of illustrations, teaching you what you need to know about geology, about mining districts, about techniques of finding gold. It covers metal detectors, sluicing, panning, dry washing, high bankers, you name it, it's covered in there. It talks some about platinum and diamonds, but it's mostly about gold because gold is more widespread. It is not so much a book about where to find gold, but a book about how to find gold. Because even if you have a location where gold was mined in the past and you go out there, well, where should you look to be successful in your prospecting, to find the gold that's there? This is the book that's going to tell you that information. I spent most of 10 years writing this book, so I thought a long time about it. It's got, like I say, lots of information and lots of illustrations, and I've had results from people who bought it. It's available on Amazon, but I recommend buying it through High Plains Prospectors, and I'll put a link in the description for buying this book through them. They have a better price than Amazon, and I have a special deal that I'll tell you a little bit more about, where you can get a 5% discount from the price even with that. On Amazon, the book rates a 4.7 out of 5, which means that of all the people that have bought it, they've been really highly satisfied, and I think you, if you buy my book, will be just as highly satisfied as well. Now let's talk a little bit more about High Plains Prospectors. They're a prospecting shop, a mail order prospecting shop that I've partnered with. The deal is that I can get you a 5% discount, a coupon code, and I'm going to put the code to that right here. It's just Chris Ralph, all caps with no space between Chris and Ralph. You put that in there as a discount code and you'll get 5% off their already really good prices. I think it's a great deal where you win by getting a discount, I get a little percentage of that, and they get new business. So if you need prospecting supplies, High Plains is really the way to go. And I'll put information, like I say, in the description more about how you can work with them, because I'm working with them. They really are great guys, a great company. For even more information, I also have a website, and I'm going to show you my webpage and talk a little bit more about that right now. This is my webpage. It's located at nevadaoutbackgems.com. You can Google it, or I have a link down in the description below. But there's lots of information here, miscellaneous stuff, pictures, some historic information as well, stories. It's got a lot of great fun stuff. You'll probably be interested in it. Now, on all of my YouTube videos, I encourage you guys to ask questions. If you have thoughts, comments, suggestions for things that I ought to look at in my videos, things that you want to find out more about, and I answer 100% of my questions. There's not very many YouTubers out there that answer 100% of their questions. I'm one of the few. And so I will do my best to answer what you have. I mean, I only can write so much. Sometimes the answer is something where I'm going to recommend that you buy the book and read about it. I also ask that you subscribe to my channel, click the bell notification so that every time I come out with a new video, you'll be able to watch it. And like I say, I cover a huge amount of topics. I also have 250 videos that I've already done. And so you can go back through my catalog of videos on YouTube. I'm sure there'll be many videos there that you'll want to take a look at, especially if you have any interest in gold or platinum, diamonds, gemstones, geology, and that sort of stuff. My YouTube site is going to be right up your alley. So I'll see you again real soon. We'll be out in the field and back in the office at the whiteboard, and whether we're looking at gold or platinum, diamonds, gemstones, or other interesting geology, it's going to be fun. You're going to enjoy it, and we'll see you again real soon.